Hi everyone, Justiny Stoptano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Tainy project, Data. Tainy is a Puerto Rican music producer, one of the true veterans of the reggaeton scene, who has not just been active but also prolific within this style of music since its first major commercial peak in the 2000s. And he has been grinding on multiple projects per year since without fail, which really set him up to capitalize on this current era where we are getting more of this sustained presence for Latin artists on the US charts and internationally. Tainy has of course done production for some of the big young stars to come out of Puerto Rico recently, be that Mike Towers or Anuel AA or of course Bad Bunny. Also singers and rappers who were born in the US but still kind of bridge the gap between these two worlds, be that Cardi B or Kali Uchis. He also had some strong placements on that recent Rosalia record as well, MOJABI. So yeah, Tainy, he's a producer. Much of his career, while it has been long, has been spent playing a supportive role for other artists. It's only been until recently that he's taken more of the initiative to release music simply under his own name, while of course still collaborating with some of his favorites. We got a bit of a dry run with that in 2020 with the Neon 16 tape, and now we're getting that full scale with Data, not just in terms of runtime, as this thing spans about an hour with 19 tracks, but also in terms of the scope of this record and everyone involved. Because I can't think of another record in the reggaeton field that boasts features from the likes of, yes, Bad Bunny, but also Daddy Yankee, The Marias, Skrillex, Fortet, and Arca. And of course, with names like that on here, you're not simply going to hear Latin trap and reggaeton on this project, but simultaneously, Data is proving to be one of the more unique albums within those fields of music. Considering all the high gloss, bright, and futuristic sounds Tainy is infusing into them, as well as placing these songs shoulder to shoulder in the track list with bits of hip-hop and synth-pop, and some throwback dreamy 90s beats. This versatility is showcased right at the kickoff of the record with the opener featuring Mike Towers, who raps passionately over these very serene keys and angelic lead melodies, all of which are introed by these chilling group chants and tribal drums. I feel like I'm about to witness this age-old ritual or go on a spirit journey or something. It's an exciting start and a great lead into the following track, Pasiempré, which is a Latin rap cut with a lot of punchy beats, bright synthetics, and a larger-than-life finish that rivals that of the grand instrumentation you typically associate with like a Mike Dean production credit. The chord progression reminds me of Kendrick Lamar's High Power a little bit. Meanwhile, all of the production bells and whistles read like something more from Travis Scott's Rodeo or Astroworld. Following this on the record, of course, we have a lot of reggaeton cuts that are loaded with these heaping helpings of synthesizers and vocals that are very heavily laid with effects, be that Buenos Aires or Todavia. There's also Envisto as well as Fantasma AVC, where yes, we do get excessive amounts of layers and color during multiple points in these songs, but still the beats, the vocals, the instrumentals generally still come across as very regimented and maybe lacking in dynamics. I mean, I do like when Tainy takes a bit of a risk on the compositional end of these cuts, like with the synth bridge and the beat switch toward the end of Fantasma, but in a way I feel like we're kind of getting a less detailed and exciting version of what we've already heard on Bad Bunny's Yo Ago back in 2020, which Tainy also worked on, which is why I'm surprised this project sounds like a few years behind the curve, even though it's 2023. It's also worth mentioning that MOJABI, as well as a lot of Arca's recent work, has done some pretty daring stuff with reggaeton too. Speaking of Bad Bunny though, he does appear on the track Mojave Ghost, which all around is a pretty fantastic synth-pop cut with an 80s flair to it coming off of the synthesizers. Paranormal toward the back end of the album also kind of throws back to this era, but with these louder, heavier analog bass lines and chord progressions that feel like they're lifted out of some action sci-fi movie soundtrack. The instrumentation gets even more lush and dynamic once we hit cuts like Once y Once, which goes in a more melodramatic direction with these plucky descending melodies, a Latin groove, lots of syrupy layers of harmonies and keys. Meanwhile, the lyrics of the song detail a relationship that kind of goes sour. Going further into the record, there are some reggaeton cuts that do feature more dynamics and I think just a bit more nuance, be that the very dreamy and alluring Mañana, which as handily the spaciest cut on the entire record. And
VOLVER
with Fortet, who I mentioned was on the record earlier, kind of comes across like a fusion of very plucky and rustic house music, but eventually you do get those reggaeton grooves popping in after the intro. There's also Lo Siento Baby, where Bad Bunny pops up once again, and the instrumental rightfully takes a softer approach, given that he is kind of telling a personal perspective here around being afraid of love or afraid of intimacy. Again, I think it is in these more adventurous and sometimes softer moments that Tainy really shows the full range of this genre's artistic capabilities. And he also shows his own range toward the end of the record as well, with the closer, which is a very powerful piano outro featuring Zentos, where his lyrics fit the instrumental quite well, going deep into sacrifice to be where he is, also dealing with things like pills and difficulty communicating. Just a lot of pent-up angst and dissatisfaction on this track that really kind of comes through in the forlorn and pretty cinematic bed of pianos. The interludes that pop up at a few points in the track list I could kind of take or leave. I don't think they added that much to the record, but overall I liked this album quite a bit. While I may not necessarily be as head over heels for it as some may. I've seen takes that describe this album as like, you know, the Astro world of reggaeton. And for sure, there are some notes of inspiration there. There are some parallels to be drawn. But Tainy is far from the first or only artist out there to be experimenting with this genre in a creative way. I wouldn't call this record one of the boldest or most out there or most envelope pushing for sure, but there are at least some moments in the track list here where I think this proves to be one of the brightest and most epic contributions to this style of music. Add onto that the good quality features throughout the record, good performances, solid tunes, and also have to compliment the stylistic versatility Tainy showcases as he jumps from genre to genre throughout this track list without really exposing himself as having like, you know, a weak point or anything like that when he tries something that is outside of that Latin wheelhouse. Feeling a light to decent 7 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Tainy, forever.